So, this is Ben.
Hello.
And Josh.
Hello.
So, Josh, I was sitting next to me and he said, Terry Gilliam has something to say about Eugene.
Yeah, so he basically said, I was at the BFI, there was a Kovacs event for the centennial along with the 50th anniversary of Monty Python at the BFI, and basically Terry Gilliam said, the sketch with Eugene with the table, it's obviously slanted. It's about a 15-20 degree slant. But he said, I use that as the basis for a scene in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas with Johnny Depp and Benicio del Toro, where they're walking sort of, I guess it would be vertically, and everybody else is horizontal. He said that was what I used as the idea for that sketch, was Ernie's Eugene special.
And the other thing you told me while it was going on is Ben had a story about one of the names in one of the... Oh. So where does he come up with these crazy names anywhere?
Well, there's the name Kosnowski turns up over and over and over. There's Bessie Lou Kosnowski and there's Arthur B. Kosnowski. He keeps using this name. Ernie had a radio show in Trenton in the 1940s on the local radio station, which had a variety of different programming, and one of the shows was hosted by Trenton's polka king, Bernie Kosnowski. And that's where the name comes from. There's a lot of names that he would pick up, that they would turn up over and over, that he just liked them. Like Hightstown, New Jersey is a town he always mentions, and you heard it here. The name Gridley, there are names that he would pick up. There's a character name I've heard him use, Liederkranz, the last name Liederkranz. The studios that they did Kovacs Unlimited at for CBS it was actually a building that was a former opera house, the Liederkranz Hall, which was reputed to have excellent acoustics. So that's probably where. Thank you. Oh, 3 chairs for Captain Spaulding. You pick up these names along the way. The way Fields would probably, W.C. Fields would hear names and just like them and just keep using them over and over.
So in watching Eugene again for the maybe 50th time, which to me is like one of my favorite all-time Kovacs things. In fact, it was when I saw that the first time that really sort of hooked me in. And I tend to think of Kovacs more as doing visual humor and what he does with the picture, but this really has, with the humor comes as much from the sophistication of using sound. And I think he's the first person to use something like this. Can you talk about, either of you talk about this show when it first aired and why it first aired and the situation that he faced in doing this?
Josh has a very good story about where the whole concept comes from. But I think that a lot of it, he may have very well been inspired by the work of Jacques Tati, who played a lot with sound. And Tati had made Monsieur Hulot's Holiday and Mon Oncle by this point. So I think that's part of where it came from. But Ernie used to, when he was dating your mom, they would go to visit her folks.
Right.
And
so my mom's from a Pennsylvania Dutch, very white bread family, and Ernie, about 6'2", 6'3", big guy, over 200 pounds. And so when they first went to my mom's house to sort of meet the family, my grandmother had plates and dishes and silverware and glasses, and there were just things all over the table. And every time Ernie would sit down or try to move, it would clink and make noise, and it would always make some sort of terrible crash or something like that. And he just thought, like, this is not my world, I shouldn't even be here. And at some point he kind of, I think, used that weirdness for Eugene. But the real story behind that special is that Martin and Lewis had broken up, and NBC had offered Jerry Lewis a 90-minute special on NBC. And Jerry Lewis said, I'll do it, but I only want to do 60 minutes, I don't want to do 90 minutes, which may be the first time Jerry Lewis said, I don't want to do more, less. And so they tried to find someone to take over the last 30 minutes of the special, and no one would do it. And finally they went to Ernie, and he said, I'll do it, but you can't interfere with anything I want to do. And they said, great, it's not going to matter anyway, everybody's going to watch Jerry Lewis, they're not going to watch Ernie Kovacs, fine, that's great. What happened was, Jerry Lewis does this big thing, it's a major event in television because now it's Jerry Lewis solo. And what happens, nobody likes the Jerry Lewis thing, but everybody likes the Ernie thing. The critics the next day, or 2 days later, in the paper write about Ernie and not about Jerry Lewis, and talk about what a genius he is, gets him on the cover of Life magazine a few months later, which then Harry Cohen at Columbia sees and says, hey, we should get this guy in movies. And so this one special led to basically Ernie's career in motion pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, and Ernie did two. Well, the version we saw was the second version of Eugene, and the first time he did it was the one that Josh was mentioning, which is part of. It was a color spectacular. It's the only show that Ernie ever did in color, and the Jerry Lewis hour that preceded it survives in black and white, and it's. I hate to say this, but it is on YouTube, and it's 60 minutes of full on Jerry. Doing his thing loud and he does so much. He does his character, his 9-year-old character, and falling all over and all that kind of stuff. And he does a big tap dance and there's a lot of noise. And then something like this comes on. Ernie had actually been testing out some of the Eugene material when he was hosting The Tonight Show, and from October of 56 to January of 57, he tag team hosted Tonight with Steve Allen. So a lot of people don't know, and it's never mentioned, that Ernie Kovacs was one of the hosts of Tonight. But Steve Allen was doing his own show, plus Tonight was just too much for him. So Ernie took it 2 nights a week. And there are 2 kinescopes of Ernie's show that survive. And there are a couple of trial runs of some of the material. The tilted table sketch is tested out a couple of times. So he was already sort of workshopping this idea, and he hits the end of 1956, where it was an extremely productive year. He had this morning show, and then at one point, a half-hour daily show on NBC, 10:30 to 11 a.m., and then he picks up doing, from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m., a radio disc jockey show where he's also doing comedy bits. And then in the summer, he's given a summer replacement show for Caesar's Hour. So there's this period of time where Ernie is on the radio from 6 a.m. to 9 a.m. Then he does his half-hour live show at NBC, while he's also doing this weekly show on Monday nights, hoping that this would be his big break. It wasn't. The morning show ends at some point in the summer, as does the radio show, and the summer replacement special finishes in the middle of September and is not picked up, and he has nothing left except doing this Tonight 2 nights a week. And so naturally, Kovacs, the compulsive gambler, I'm sure just jumped the he didn't care that he was following Jerry Lewis. He'll just completely roll the dice, and it totally paid off. And then he remade the Eugene special in 1961 as part of his ABC specials, and expanded on it, and took it even into an even more surreal territory. I think he was trying to get a Eugene movie made. He talks about it in an interview, a television interview that was filmed in the summer of 1961. The special he had taped and intended for November of 61 got bumped to December, and he taped this and aired that instead. And my theory is that he was hoping to make a movie, because this is a time when Jerry makes The Bellboy, was about to release Ladies' Man. Tati has made a couple of films, so the idea of this sort of nonlinear narrative, unusual comedy with an unusual character wandering through a weird space was sort of happening at the time.
So, do you want to talk about Percy Dovetails? Where did that character come from, and how was it received at that time? And looking at it now, how do we look at that?
Oh, you want to take any of that? Ernie's TV show in Philadelphia had a budget of like $1.50 a week, and so he was on the air every day live from 7 a.m. to 9 a.m. and they would play records, and they would he would draw things, and he would make up sketches, and they had to fill 2 hours of airtime. And so what you would call a production assistant, a guy named Andy McKay, who was in the sketches, who would run around and help Ernie out, and would go to the 5 and 10, if you know what that is, good, and would look for cheap novelty items to bring in as costume pieces. The rubber 8 masks that you see, and the hats, and there were these novelty glasses. And that I think the originals were meant to be the thing where you wear it so it looks like you're awake but you're sleeping in class. And the line across for the eyelid is if you see a good photograph of them, you see that it's been drawn in black grease pencil. So he may have added that. But it started in the days in Philadelphia. There's a draft of, a typewritten poem of some thoughts while falling off the Empire State Building. That survives that somebody sent to me, and there was a guy who read poetry on the radio. I am blanking on his name, but he just in his soft spoken way read poetry, and he had this tagline of just something like outside the bookends. But I think that Andy McKay handed him those glasses, and he put them on. And, like it is with a lot of people who do improv, you put on a piece of costuming and see how it looks, and the character just happens. It was never, I don't think it was ever meant to be mean-spirited or anything. It's certainly less caustic than a lot of other depictions of gay men that you would see on television, certainly Milton Berle and many other people. It was just way, way over the top. It was just sort of a gentle character that it was a character he got tired of doing. It was one of those things that became very popular. People would request him to do it over and over. He did a guest shot on the Perry Como show and does a poem about Perry Como, who supposedly had worked as a barber. So there's an ode to Perry's snipping scissors that he does. But he got tired of doing it. But it was one of those things that people kept requesting.
Speaking of things they kept requesting, do you want to talk a little bit about the evolution of the Nairobi Trio?
Okay. Okay. No, okay. Yeah.
Well, I guess, essentially what Ben is saying is true, but what my mom always told me about Ernie was that he could hear a piece of music and within 15 minutes had a sketch. Not all the time, but that happened with the Nairobi Trio. It happened, I think, with, you see a lot of music on his specials, and he was a big fan of, my mom told me that when she met him, he was a big fan of, Wagner and German and very heavy and very manly stuff. My mom was like, no, there's other things out there. So she would take him to opera that wasn't quite so heavy and dark. But it was really that, he could find a piece of comedy in music, and supposedly the Nairobi Trio was something he did in about 15 or 20 minutes and said, I know what I want, I know how I want to do this. And I think, Percy Dove Tonsils, or anybody else was just, something that Andy McKay may have handed him, or someone actually just said, like, here's this piece of music, and he went, like, he loved Ema Sumac, which he mentions in there. And, in one of the shows, which I don't even,
She's a guest on
yeah,
the show. Yeah.
She does Tumba, I think.
Yeah.
And it's this insane set where there's lava and like all this volcano stuff. And I think that was just part of Ernie. Whatever excess worked.
How many different people were in that costume?
Well, usually the pianist was Edie.
Yeah.
And then there were rotating people who'd be the other person on mallets. In the version that it aired in the last Ernie Kovacs special, it's Jolene Brand on piano, Ernie on conducting, and I had just always assumed that the person on the mallets was Bobby Lauer, the short guy who's in a lot of the specials. But we did a panel event a few years ago, and somebody, or maybe it was me, asked her who was that, and she said, "Oh, it's Jack Lemmon." So there was, and he would perform it live. What's interesting at least for me, with the Nairobi tree is how few times it actually, we have very few kinescopes or tapes of the actual routine. It's maybe done 3 or 4 times. Maybe the tapes that we're missing are the ones that have him doing it over and over. It supposedly came together when he was doing the show for Dumont, a late night show at 11:30 at night, where they were trying to have a live audience and try to get people to come in to see a live television show at 11:30. And eventually he changed on the tickets. It said admit one passing stranger. Because you just couldn't get people to come in. There was a rotation, and he would do it at nightclubs and stuff like that. And
Yeah, there was a big event in Los Angeles every year called the Share Show, and it was SHARE, and it was a benefit show, and it was for Cedars-Sinai Hospital, and it was a big thing for entertainers to come up and perform. And frequently Ernie would do this, and at the end, it would be Jack Lemmon and Ernie and even Frank Sinatra and things like that taking off the mask. But what was so great about it is it's a very typical Ernie gag that you don't even know who's under there, and you won't ever know who's under there. But the joke is, that's Frank Sinatra under there.
Right.
And there's only about 10 people that get it because they were on the set, and that's it.
So I don't know when you have to get out of here, but does anybody have any questions they want to ask? Okay, I can't, okay, question back there, yes.
Yeah, I was just curious whether there's any evidence that Rowan Atkinson saw the Eugene stuff, because it reminded me a lot of Mr. Bean.
We should ask Ron over here.
Oh, yeah.
Very much so.
I don't know for sure. I mean, you know, Ron, you actually manage Mr. Bean, right? I mean,
Yeah,
this is your.
I'm not aware that he ever saw him.
Okay.
So I can't comment on that part, but he sure looks like him in some of these things.
Yeah. You know, what's interesting is that a friend of mine showed this to her nephew. This was like 20 years ago. Showed Ernie Kovacs, and he loved Mr. Bean, and it was like kids discovered Ernie Kovacs, and he just thought it was the greatest thing. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Like, it's working on so many different levels. Like, kids love, you know, Ernie as well. I mean, it's that malleable face, or that's that, you know, wacky thing that they're doing. But I think Mr. Bean had that, you know, effect as well.
Oh, I've got one.
Oh, I've got one too.
Can you talk about the music videos and the animating the
animating a chicken.
yes,
Yeah.
please.
The piece that you saw with the Esquivel music and was done. The thing that is amazing about it is that it is basically 1 or 2 full performance takes. So every cut that you see is happening in a control room, which means that Ernie has come up with this crazy idea about dancing, you know, chickens and salt shakers, and had his staff and crew build this elaborate set and position people around the set to operate each piece and learn the music and perform it in time like choreography, but it's not post-scored. So that's why, you know, he would tape his shows on a single day, but it would go into quadruple golden, incredible amounts of overtime. But when you see those elaborate things, and that was nothing compared to some of the other things he would do, like the story of a drop of water, or the thing he does with the Firebird Suite with the operating room. It's all one take for 4 or 5 minutes, and we've heard in interviews that his crews loved working with him, and not only because they got paid the overtime, but I think they didn't get to play with stuff like that on any other show that they worked on. But it was a combination of, like Josh said, Ernie would hear a piece of music and see a visual for it instantly and just write out the ideas. Then everybody had to construct these things. And supposedly, but just before he passed, one of the notes he gave to his special effects guy for an idea he had was, can you make square bubbles?
Whoa.
And so, I mean, he was always having these crazy ideas, but they were very intricately choreographed and performed that way.
I just want to elaborate on that. So on the ABC specials, which was the kitchen symphony you saw with the chicken, basically Ernie was hired by ABC. Dutch Masters was his bankrolled everything. So Dutch Masters bought the half hour from ABC, which was a fledgling third network at the time. They were happy to just get that off their books. They made their money from that. And Dutch Masters, as long as they sold cigars, they were very happy. So, and they did with Ernie. So Ernie could do whatever he wanted. He had the greatest situation ever because ABC wasn't telling him what to do, Dutch Masters wasn't telling him what to do, and he got to do whatever he wanted. However, Ernie was a crazed insomniac and very much would, spend 3 hours sleeping, and the rest of the time he would be doing something else. So he kind of expected his crew to work in the same manner. So a typical 8-hour day would turn into a 12-hour day, would turn into a 16-hour day, and a 20-hour day, and that's why they were getting double, triple golden time, and they were driving Cadillacs, and all their friends were not driving Cadillacs. But when Ernie died, he was very much in debt. Ernie didn't understand below the line, above the line. He had no understanding of how that worked. So the IRS came to my mom and said, when he passed away, you owe us about $350,000. The other $150,000, ABC came to my mom and said, Ernie's been over budget and you have to pay that back too.
Oh.
So it was great, and the crew loved him, but it cost him because he just didn't understand what production was in a lot of ways.
Does somebody else have a question there? Yes.
Yeah, I had a question. I was just wondering, are those the original German lyrics to Back the Knife?
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's I think it's the original cast recording from the early 30s.
Okay.
And there's a CD that came out. It's kind of out of print, but I'm sure you can find it, called the Ernie Kovacs Record Collection. And a guy named Erwin Schutz had helped put that together and found which recording that was, and it's licensed and it's on there. But that's definitely the original German.
Yes.
ErnieKovacs.com.
Yes. Oh, and you can buy it at ErnieKovacs.com. Yes.
Now, Ben, about how many episodes, about how many hours of his TV show survived?
The question is how many hours of his TV shows survive. I haven't really tallied it up. I know how much we have and what's missing. Like, we have all the ABC specials survive. One of the nice things that happened when Library of Congress acquired the collection in 2015, according to the inventory we had at the time, we were missing about a third of the series. And that's what I thought had gotten wiped by ABC. But when the Library of Congress processing technician recatalogued the collection, turned out, no, we have actually the entire two seasons, except for one episode, which turned up this year, somewhere else, yeah. So that entire thing exists. We have about half of his morning shows for ABC, all 9 of the summer replacement specials. There's only one episode of Kovacs Unlimited, the CBS program. What's remarkable is that, and I don't know how your mom conjured this up, and Edie Adams is the reason we can see any of this, because she found it and saved it and held on to it. But a show called Ernie and Kovacs Land from 1951, when Ernie was still a regional, he did a summer replacement show for Kukla, Fran, and Ollie. And it ran from the beginning of July through the end of August, and we have the first 4 and the last 4 episodes on Kinescope. And that's the show that Edie Adams auditioned for. And it's really, what's really sweet and cute is in the first few episodes that she's on, she keeps calling him Mr. Kovacs, oh, Mr. Kovacs. But that's, you want to tell the story about how she got the job?
Well, so she was always, she went to Juilliard, and she wasn't making a lot of money, but she was doing all these contests, and she was winning a lot of toasters and things like that, but not making a lot of money. And she finally went on Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts, and she knew opera, and she knew classical music, and she basically sang a song where she won the contest, and part of it was that she got to go to a club date in Montreal. But the other thing was that someone actually saw her, one of the producers of Ernie's show, and while she was doing the club date in Montreal, they got in touch with her and said, "Hey, there's this guy Kovacs in Philadelphia. Maybe you want to go to the show." And she had never heard of him, didn't know anything about him, and she went down to Philadelphia, and kind of the rest was history after that.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. The story she told was that, like Josh told you about her background, and here's this big 6 foot whatever guy with a mustache and a cigar and a big floppy hat, and she said, I want one of those. Just this instant, yeah.
So you mentioned Take a Good Look. So if you have an opportunity, by the way, there are many of these collections that are outside and for sale. It's the crazy, if you thought the game show in there was crazy, the game show, Take a Good Look, there are these clues that make absolutely no sense. It is like an absurdist game show, and all it is an excuse to do the craziest skits that you can imagine, and they're trying to figure out what is the clue here, and is it insane, and how that existed is almost an absurd thing in itself.
Yeah. They had shot a pilot of this show called Take a Good Look, where somebody in the news who'd been written up in Look magazine or Life magazine was a secret guest. There was a panel of celebrities who had to guess who this person was. They shot a pilot with some guy named Mike Wallace, and it didn't really work out so well. And Ernie needed money, and took this show. And so the clues, like Bart was saying, were videotaped sketches. And a lot of the blackouts you see in between the oscilloscope lines were actually things he shot as clues. And what Josh has found out, because I think your mom told him that Ernie was shooting these clues, but with the idea that he would repurpose them later for another show that he wouldn't have to actually make. But the clues would literally not make any sense. It would be a sketch with like a short comedy sketch, and maybe the clock in the back wall was set at 5 o'clock because the secret guest had 5 brothers and sisters, and that was the thing and you would never have looked at it, and every time they would come out of the clue and they cut to the panel, it was Edie Adams and a few different people who were in rotation, like Cesar Romero and Carl Reiner and Mort Saul and different people, and Hans Conried, and you would come out of the clue and they'd cut to the panel and they'd be and there's one where Hans Conried says, Ernie, tell him it's rigged. And you almost see this glint in Ernie's eye, like it's this joke he's having with the home audience, like they're never going to guess this. They're never going to guess this. And that's where he started making the Dutch Masters commercials, which is why you hear audience laughter over some of them, because they would air them to the audience while the show was running.
Have any other questions?
I got one. I think I saw my Ernie Kovacs in 52, 53, 54, those years, somewhere in there. That guy in the race car that was going to go through the fire.
Yeah.
He did that another way, also.
Yeah.
Did you find that sequence?
Well, we only found what you saw, which is from 56, but because there's so little that survives from 1952, 53, 54. And he did, because these were done live and they were never redone, he would do sketches over and over.
Yeah.
A Welcome Transient sketch was something he would do a couple of other times because nobody would remember it. It's called Welcome Transients because there was a popular show at the time called Welcome Traveler. But what I love about that sketch is that he's spoofing pre-interviewing people on talk shows, which is rampant now, and for him to be spoofing this while the form is being invented is really amazing. Just so you know, the other guy in the sketch is a guy named Matt Dennis, who is a singer and a songwriter, and because he sang songs that were under copyright, all of his numbers are cut out on the DVD. We have it, but he's a great sketch player as well, and was a great part of the ensemble.
And we have one more question? Yes.
Did Ernie ever do a Christmas special?
Did Ernie ever do a Christmas special? We were looking, no. There is a Dutch Masters Cigars commercial that involves Ernie and Santa Claus. But not a Christmas special. There's an episode that aired in December of '61, but it's not a Christmas show.
But what's funny is that with the it's not a video, but we have these audio transcription discs that my mom made, and we actually were able to put together a CD of my mom performing Christmas songs because it just happened to be that we had the ones from December. So the whole month she's singing one song a day. So we have like 16 songs of my mom. We also found all these Percy Dove Tonsil's Christmas poems.
Oh.
And we put those to record as well. So
Also available in the
yeah, well, yes. But what's amazing is that, you know, we keep finding things. There was, we did an event in LA at UCLA, and they found a blooper reel, which is 10 minutes, which is amazing. It's Ernie swearing just to cut everybody out. You ever heard Ernie say fuck? It's great. And there's this one commercial we found for AC spark plugs that he does with my mom, which is really weird. And then we found the Take a Good Look, and we actually found, this is not Ernie stuff, but my mom, so this is an interesting little tidbit. So Dutch Masters, there was a guy named Jack Mogilescu, and he basically kept Ernie making money for a long time. When Ernie passed away, they went to my mom and said, we'd like you to redo this brand, Muriel Cigars, which is what she was very much known for. And Muriel basically funded my college at some point, where I was going somewhere with this. Where were we?
Do you remember any of your college years?
I don't remember my college. It was that quarter I just had. No, so my mom ends up doing her own show, and Muriel Cigars is a big part of that, and there's a lot of Christmas stuff there as well. But
She did ads for a long time.
she did, and you know, when I was 15, to hear guys going like, "Your mom, she was a hot number," and I was like, I don't want to hear that. But at 50, I'm like, okay, it's fine. She was.
Sending her payments for a long time, right?
That was the other thing. So this guy Jack Mogilescu was really good to my mom, and my mom, legitimately, Muriel sold a lot of cigars. And it was because of her. So at some point, they gave my mom a 20-year contract. So they basically fired her in about 1970, and Susan Anton took over, and then shortly after, tobacco ads were banned. But about 1989, 1990, my mom, damn it. And I was like, what? And she goes, this is the year I don't get paid by Muriel. So she was getting paid, you know, for almost 15 years for doing absolutely nothing. So they took care of her for sure. Yeah.
One last question. Do we have one? I can't see.
In the back.
In the back.
In the back. Okay, and you get it.
How much of his work is tied up because of rights management, like you mentioned in that scene?
The question is, how much of his work is tied up in rights?
You know, only, we own everything, so that's great. Basically what happened was when Ernie died, my mom bought everything back from the network. So in terms of the actual physical tapes and the actual rights for the tapes, we own that. And it wasn't given to her, she actually paid for it. When it comes to things like the music rights for DVDs, it's literally only an issue of dollars and cents. You know, publishers charge a certain amount of money per song. And if it becomes exorbitant, you get to a point where you gotta pay $50,000 in music fees, or you're gonna make that back right away. So that's the only reason it's not on. It's not that we don't have it or we couldn't get it, it's just, does somebody financially wanna come up with the money? So in terms of rights, we're pretty good. It's just, you know, economics at some point.
So Josh,
Yeah.
I seem to remember that like Edie saved everything and then had to deal with Comedy Central, and they transferred some of that stuff to D2. Can you talk about how that happened and then what happened after that?
Yeah, so in about '89, there was a period where my mom financially was having a really rough time, and with all these shows, and Comedy Channel, it was called the Comedy Channel. There were two competing comedy channels. There was Ha, and there was Comedy Channel. And Ha was showing Rhoda reruns and, you know, things that had been on syndication and things like that. Comedy Channel came to my mom and said, we want to diversify, we want to be different, we want to show other things. And they paid my mom a lot of money to have the rights to her show. And part of that was that they upgraded it to 1990s technology of D1s and D2s, but
It was a big deal at that time.
it was a big deal. It was a lot of money. It was hundreds of thousands of dollars. Now they're completely obsolete, but whatever. So it put us into a very good position, which also then led to the Best of Kovacs coming out on a thing called White Star. So it turned everything around. My mom, I mean, if you can imagine in 1963 paying, 5 or 6 figures for all this material, storing it for 35 years, waiting for the opportune time to actually release it, and it just so happened it came at a time where it was really necessary. It was almost like a weird little moment of because I literally got to a point where I was like, Mom, this is costing you so much money every year. You're paying thousands and thousands of dollars just to store this material. What's the point? It's not doing anything. And then, of course, one deal comes through, and it's a 7-figure deal. So it was a good thing.
And had that not happened, those old tapes might not have.
Yeah, I mean, part of the deal was that not only there were 2 people, Henry Bollinger, who you mentioned earlier, who is my mom's publicist manager, and a guy named Gordon Smith, paid a few $1,000s to transfer some of the things to show Comedy Channel. And once they saw that, okay, this is actually pretty good, they said, we will kick in the other, I mean, it was something like $350,000 to actually transfer it, and that was on top of what we were getting paid. So they really wanted to make a splash. Of course, what happens? They put it on, a new head of programming comes in, and within 6 months, it's not even on. So nobody really got to see it even on Comedy Central or Comedy Channel.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming, and I want to thank the Alamo Drafthouse for letting us be here. And I hope and assume all of you will be coming tomorrow night for the Kovacs Award with John Cleese at the Texas Theater. It should be a really wonderful night. Thank you guys so much for coming to town. Really appreciate it. And Kelly and Raquel, who's I think here, and everybody else who worked really, really hard to make this happen. And thank you, Ron, for coming.
Well, let me tell you, that was a hell of a show.
Well, thank you. Thank you all. We can hang out and talk in the lobby, and we'll see you tomorrow.